Warning, the following video has flashing lights and also includes content that may be deemed inappropriate for some viewers. Viewer discretion is advised. Maximum, finally, you have found your way into the darkness of the Fox Den so that we can link up for an episode of Midnight Lycanthropy here on LordeStarfox Radio. This will be epic as always, yet please, I really do need to feed. Absolutely delicious. And now that we have conquered that little issue, it is time for Maxim and myself to take a walk into the madness known as the Dogman.
Stood up. I said, oh my god, it's a werewolf. And everybody in the car freaked out.
My creatures of the night, yes, once again you're tuning in to Midnight Lycanthropy here on LordeStarfox Radio. We have Maxim, who's decided to make his way into the Fox Den and set up the late night fire for us as we burn the timber into the early hours of the morning and read a few more chapters from the Midnight Society book. How you doing tonight, my friend?
Real good, Starfox. Thanks for having me on. I'm excited about the conversation we're going to have, and looking forward to telling you listeners about my latest book, The Lost Tribes of Bigfoot. And, it's been published by Hanger One Publishers. They're the guys that gave us Monster Quest, Doug and Alex Highcheck, and just a great publishing firm. But the book is just incredible. It's just been out for about maybe 5-6 months, and it's already, making some racket. So I'm really pleased with it. It's a great book. It's my 7th book, and I'm just glad to be part of this paranormal cryptid, demographic. So, glad to be here.
Great stuff. I do appreciate you allotting some time to hang out with us. I actually know Doug pretty well. I've had a couple of conversations via text with Alex, but I actually was just texting with Doug earlier about catching up here at some point, which is pretty awesome. You were referred to me from my good old buddy Drewski, who rolls with, my good old friend Jessica Jones. Great stuff right there. I do appreciate
it. They're great people. And I've been in this paranormal game for 9 years. My book, The Shepton Mythology, was that came out in 2016. So that was 9 years ago. And I'm a former psychologist and rock journalist, and I was just putting a book together about the song about and its connection with an actual mine disaster, and that was the Shepton mine disaster of 1963, where 3 guys were entombed for 2 weeks. Only 2 came out. There were horrible, unfounded rumors of, but there was also allegations that Pope John the 23rd was down there in the mine with them for 2 weeks. And here's the thing, Pope John the 23rd died in June of 63. Shepton took place in August of 63. So this was a case of, and not just one, but all 3 of the Pope's miracles took place after he. So this is just like an amazing thing. And again, I tell everybody, I didn't go looking for the paranormal. The paranormal found me. I'm just a rock journalist writing a book about rock and roll, about a song that talks about, and matching it with the real life event. So that opened up the doors to the paranormal for me.
Very interesting stuff right there. Well spoken. And
that was 2016. And then after the Shepton mythology came out, I started to get invited to podcasts. And yes, we had podcasts back in 2016. They really took off. They exploded after 2020, 2021. But I was invited to expos. Australia's Mysterious Universe did a 90-minute segment on me and the Shepton mythology. And then, of course, the Skeptical Inquirer, they had a really big piece about it, an extensive piece. And, most of it was good and was correct. They had one part, though, where they took exception to what the miners saw. And they evoked Occam's razor, which is a very, medieval philosophical tool, that when there's an issue, a problem, you boil it down to the least complex explanation. And they were claiming that the miners, rather than experiencing, a miraculous event, that they were hallucinating. So that was their thing. I disagree with it, because when you talk about issues of the paranormal, of the spiritual, of the miraculous, it's not, there's no common denominator. This goes beyond that. It's more complex. It's more convoluted. It's more involved. And so you can't just wipe it away with a word, with the Occam's razor. But they tried to do that. But again, we've seen this before with people like J. Allen Hynek and all those projects like Blue Book, Grunge, and Sign, where they would look at these witnesses and say that they were crazy, they were hallucinating, they were seeing the planet Venus or ducks or whatever, swamp gas. So discounting witnesses has been part and parcel of this whole thing with skeptics and the scientific community. So we have a challenging road ahead, my friend, just trying to get the word out and let people know what we believe and, what we've seen and all that. So, but, I'm glad to be a part of that endeavor.
Absolutely. Great stuff again right there, my friend. Seems like you stay extremely busy and keep a very broad range of things you dive into. As I mentioned before we started recording here, I definitely try to specialize in missing persons and national forests or cave systems, historic and modern day predator behaviorisms. The fact that we have a ton of unknown footprints, vocalizations. A lot of people don't realize that every year anywhere from 1,100 to 2,400 people just vanish in our national parks. Boom, gone. Only 5% are ever found. And that's not solidifying that they are still with us. That's just solidifying remains, or some of them, yes, are still living. Super bizarre stuff right there. Before we start diving into one of the books you've been working on, what is your thought about the whole Dogman thing in general? Because there is a big difference between Dogman and werewolves. A lot of people think they're one and the same, yet they're not, but we could talk about that another time. How do you feel about all that, though?
Well, the Dogman thing, is relatively new to me, because most of my research is in Sasquatch and Bigfoot. And I'm a snowbird. I spend summers in Pennsylvania and winters in Florida. So I'm down in Florida now, and that's where the Skunk Ape is. And where I live near the Gulf Coast, but where I live in Citrus County, we're really close to Lake and Sumter counties. We're close to the Green Swamp, and that's in Lake and Sumter and Polk counties, but that's 110,000 acres. There's a lot of places there for, the skunk ape to hide. And then even further south at Ocala National, the Everglades, 16 counties, from Miami-Dade all the way up to Polk, 16 counties, a lot of swamps. Again, a lot of places for cryptids to hide. So, I've seen reports, the Travel Channel said that Pennsylvania is number 3 as far as Bigfoot sightings. Another source said that Florida is number 3, but we know that after Washington State, after California, that either Pennsylvania or Florida is next. So, I mean, they're in the top 5, but, so I'm well informed with Bigfoot and skunk ape, but with Dogman and also with the Thunderbirds, which we keep on hearing about. I don't know a whole lot about it, but I'll tell you this: when I do my presentations, and people, during the breaks, people will come up to me, and what they tell me, what they talk about mostly, are that these individuals talk to people, typically relatives, and also they see orbs that follow them. And so this seems to be the most prominent thing that I've seen. As far as dogfit, we've had there's numerous sightings in Pennsylvania, and a lot of the guys, especially in Western Pennsylvania, are tracking Dogman and talking about it. So I did a presentation in Johnstown at the Bigfoot Expo, and they had a guy there talking about Dogman. So Pennsylvania has a lot of woods. There's a lot of black bear there, and Jeff Meldrum seems to think there's a correlation between the population of black bear and also the population of Bigfoot. So you could probably even stick Dogman into there as well. But are you familiar with a lot of sightings of Dogman in Pennsylvania or in Florida?
Again, great stuff right there, my friend. Yes, I am. I have a ton of reports from both areas, and sometime on an episode, without having to just kind of glance over them like here, we can sit down and actually pick out a few. One of the best footprints that we have on file came from Shenango Valley, from a friend of mine, Jamie King, who is also a host on here. We then have some of the more old school ones, like the Shenango Valley Dog Boy. We have a bunch of other type encounters from that area, which is pretty gnarly for sure. I did grow up here in New England, but my stepdad was from Honesdale, Pennsylvania.
Oh, yeah, very close. Yeah, okay, cool.
Yeah, we went down there a few times. And I remember driving through like the Poconos. Yeah. Definitely a ton of open area, but also a ton of dense forest. I remember him bringing us down to an area where there were so many deer you could just roll down your window and they'd come up and eat food from you and stuff. Yeah. And there was just so many of them. Wouldn't surprise me. I mean, there's game sources and things, and it tends to be a correlation in sightings in areas where you have Bigfoot and Dogman. Some people think they might be working together, which I'm not necessarily sold on that, but I do know in India and other areas that primates will steal puppies and also wolf pups and things and raise them, meaning as these monkeys grow older, they now have protection, which also I don't necessarily think Dogman has to be canine, which I'll dive into another episode with you. Yet here, let's say maybe Sasquatch, again, because I am in the side, I don't really dive into it, but I grew up hearing about it, obviously. I feel like there's definitely different layers. You have some primate-based activities which solidify primate behavior, yet you also have in other areas where descriptions vary a bit, which I think involves some prehistoric ancestors or relatives of ours, or maybe even Neanderthals. Yet same thing with the Dogman stuff. People say, hey, it has to be canine because of the term. Incorrect. Rest in peace, Linda Godfrey. She even herself said she wishes she didn't necessarily use that term because, I have a lot of research supporting that hyenas, baboons are highly involved, because a lot of people who aren't familiar with baboons and they had never seen one before, they have long raccoon-like hands. They have huge incisor canine teeth. They have
absolutely. Yeah, I can picture one.
Large manes. Yeah. Then they bark, they howl, they run in packs.
Yep.
Well, I could see some of this all being involved, which is why I wanted to just see your thought on the whole topic before we start diving into something you'd like to touch base on.
Well, the thing that I have a question for you. You know, we know that most people, and these accounts, the Bigfoot sightings are pretty uniform across the board. But you know, typically Bigfoot is maybe 8 to 10 feet tall, maybe 12 foot. Swamp ape down here in Florida, more like 7 foot. And I was just wondering, with the Dogman sightings, how tall are they reporting Dogman to be?
Great question right there. The reason I wanted to ask you that is before I answer that, it ties into when you asked me about Florida encounters. We have a super gnarly one that occurred with a bunch of people and traders in the market. It was a long time ago. This huge baboon was following people around this little village. Well, they felt uncomfortable and they followed the baboon. And apparently it was the size of a man. But keep in mind, it all depends, though, of where you're located in the world. How tall were these people? I mean, I know for a fact here in America, we tend to get a little bit taller than we do in other countries. So say if you're in Thailand and they say it's the size of a man, well, yes, it doesn't necessarily mean it was 6'4", you know? So I try to understand that and look around. But either way, they followed this baboon to the outskirts of the forest, and they found a bunch of old cotton bins that it had set up a nest in. It ran away. They never caught it. Now, to answer your question, there's a ton of other encounters we can dive into from Florida as well. Yeah, yes, you have some variations that occur too, and we're trying to figure out, is this natural, just like with anything else? I mean, a coyote up in New England and a coyote out west are probably going to be bigger than a coyote down south. All right. It's just the way things work. If this is an animal, which we do tend to believe there is some animal involvement, not completely, because I know it's broken down into 3 ways, potentially paranormal, potentially extraterrestrial, and potentially physical. I try to spread out the encounters of how they come in to the people that dive into and specialize in those sectors. Yeah, if it is a living animal, bears get bigger in different spots. Look at Kodiak Island compared to a grizzly bear or any other brown bear. They're all
sure, related.
Yeah. But that Kodiak has been separated, so the lineage is changed, which means it's bigger. So the reason I mentioned that is because I'm really trying to figure this out with my science team. When Linda Godfrey first started taking reports, and in my opinion, and as far as I know, she was the first to really dive into this and make books about it and such way before the internet. It was reported to be 5 to 6 feet tall, give or take, right? But fast forward now, you have reports all of a sudden where it could be like 9 to 10 feet tall. It makes me wonder, is it something that, like the old school game, hey, you actually saw something, caught this trout, next thing you know, it's a blue fish, then it comes a blue whale. Wait a second, no, we just caught a trout. It wasn't a blue whale. Is that what's going on? Or is it just natural, like you said, in different areas, the sizes would range? But I mean, 5 to 6 is still not even close, though, to 8 to 9. That's a huge jump right there. Because I mean, even
you're talking about dog, right, being 5 to 6 foot.
Yes, like the Beast of Brick Road and the Michigan Dogman, etc. Yes.
Yeah. What's interesting with Bigfoot is that with all of the sightings, the size, the 8, 10 foot tall, the smells. Typically, the Bigfoot has a horrible stench like rotten eggs or a wet dog or fecal matter. They talk about that, or maybe even something that's sweet. And there's even reports where, like in my book, The Lost Tribes of Bigfoot, I talk about Albert Osman. He was the Swedish Canadian trapper that was actually abducted by a family of Sasquatch. And there was no smell there. So I think that, they use the smell mainly, I believe, as protection, as a means to scare us away, keep us out of their territory. But Albert Osman was the first reported, and as far as I know, the only episode of anyone being abducted by a Sasquatch. And this was a family. This was back in 1924. And he didn't say anything about it until years later when there were reports about these creatures, these cryptids. And then he went to John Green, who was a journalist from British Columbia. John Green was one of the original 4 horsemen of Sasquatchery. And in my book, The Lost Tribes of Bigfoot, I dedicate my book to these, to the 4 horsemen of Sasquatchery, because these are the guys that did all the hard work in the beginning before computers and microfiche and everything else. But John Green's up there with Peter Byrne, Grover Krantz. Grover Krantz was the first one to use the word Sasquatch, which comes from British Columbia, the native coastal peoples, and the Rene Dahinden. So those are the 4 guys that did the heavy work. And one thing that's interesting with Peter, I don't know if your listeners know about this, but there was a guy named Tom Slick. Tom Slick was a multimillionaire from Texas. He was an oil man, and he believed in cryptids. Well, what he did was he got game hunter Peter Byrne to come over from Ireland, and he paid him money to go to the Himalayas looking for abominable snowman, Yeti, and then also sent him to the Pacific Northwest to go and try to find Bigfoot. And they weren't able to find anything, but there was a motion picture that was being made about Tom. It was called Tom Slick Monster Hunter. Nicolas Cage was supposed to play Tom Slick, and it was going to be about Tom Slick, recruiting the Byrne to go there and look for this cryptid. So the combination of Peter Byrne and Tom Slick, would have been just like incredible. So I don't know what's happening with that motion picture now. I heard that it's on hold, but if that comes out, I'm going to be the first one in line to get a ticket, because that's going to be pretty awesome. And this is stories. This is the history of things that happened, in this field of cryptozoology that very few people, other than us, avid researchers, know about. So it would be great if that came out, just to give people more insight into the whole dynamic there. So anyway, we'll see what happens with that. But Nicolas Cage was supposed to play Tom Slick.
Very interesting stuff right there. I've heard bits and pieces of that, yet not the whole entire thing until you have broken it down. And also, kudos on the book right there. Make sure, if in the bio you sent me, your links aren't in there, that you text those to me as well. And if they are already in there, I'll make sure that they're up in the description of the video. Do you personally think there's any correlation between missing people and, per se, the Dogman and Bigfoot? The reason I ask that is I personally believe there is a multitude of issues, people that are just misfortunate, people that are being taken by known predators, people that are being taken by nefarious human beings, because we have a ton of proof that psychotic individuals are out in the forest. Also, people can see that on Hulu and other documentaries where serial unalivers go in very remote places because they know people will go there. Yes, potential feral human beings.
Well, let me just jump in there right now with what you're saying. But I remember years ago I had a subscription to We magazine, and We was the more, I guess, risque, more progressive, more hip version of Playboy. And there was an article in there called "There's Danger in Them There Hills," and they talked about hikers going out there into the mountains, and and that there's people out there that are predators that are just looking for these people that are vulnerable and stalking them, and doing some nasty things to them. So, yeah, you're right. I mean, there is danger out there, and you got to be careful. But, what happens to the missing people? Well, there's, you look at all the possibilities, and then you look at, and just put it on a chalkboard, all the possibilities, even the ones that are off the wall, and just take a look at those and give all of those consideration. Let me share this with you. I want to talk about 3 guys in Pennsylvania that went missing for a while, but they were found. I'm doing an article on the Wisner State Forest, And Wisner State Forest is in north central Pennsylvania. There's been an abundance of orb sightings, of Bigfoot sightings, just a lot of weird stuff. But there was a guy, he was a law enforcement guy, that they found and naked in the wintertime. He had hypothermia. And this law enforcement guy had taken what they call monkey dust, and it makes you very hot, like just hyper hot and delusional. So he took off his clothes and eventually died of hypothermia. The same thing happened in western Pennsylvania in Cook Forest, and that's a larger area there by north of Pittsburgh and close to Erie. But same thing, two law enforcement guys. This is three law enforcement guys in Pennsylvania on opposite sides of the state, but two of these law enforcement guys were found in Cook Forest naked. They had injected themselves with the monkey dust, which gives you a feeling of euphoria, and but also it ramps up your heat, and your body has a hard time regulating that heat, so you're just burning up. And these guys were delusional, and so anyway, I just thought that it was pretty bizarre that. And I'm a former drug and alcohol counselor. I worked for the Pennsylvania Department of Drug and Alcohol Programs, and I studied these new emerging drugs, and for a while really was pretty popular, but very easy to get, but a very dangerous drug. But anyway, we had that again. These guys went missing for a while, and then they were found, and they could have easily been eaten by predators, and it doesn't take long. What do they say? Like, I know where I am down here in Florida, there was a wild pig that got hit by a car, and it was by where we live. And I watched it, and the vultures came, the turkey buzzards, and it took maybe 2 weeks for that pig to be nothing but a skin. After the rain, the water, the rain, the sun, and the birds, the predators, and it just was just a flattened thing. But just 2 weeks. And I couldn't. But if something happens in the woods, with more predators, because this happened on the side of the road, but with other instances, being deep in the woods, I think there's a lot more predators, and I think that those bodies could disappear faster than 2 weeks. So, David Pallades talked about the missing. He was down at the Ocala Bigfoot Expo. The first year that I was there. And so there's, some interesting things happening there, but I think it's great research. And I just, I applaud your journey. This is something that's really of interest to, I think, everybody.
Very kind words. Appreciate you. And also excellent stuff right there. I'm just filling up the good old file cabinet upstairs in my brain with some quality information. Reason I asked that is, I do personally believe, like I said, all of what I mentioned are involved, but I also think Sasquatch and Dogman are going to be the ones that are ranking a little bit higher up there. And the reason I said that is you had spoke about one of the encounters that seemed to be quote unquote friendly. Yet from the majority of stuff of Dogman, Skinwalkers, any of that stuff is considered taboo to any of my Native American friends. I also had a chance to speak to some individuals from the Choctaw tribe.
Oh, okay.
And they have spoken, to summarize it real quick, they had a war with the Sasquatch, meaning once they were pushed out of their land by the Westerners, they had to march a very long distance with no food and end up in a very small area. I've covered this before, so to the audience, if you want more details, you can find it in the good old playlist down below. Either way, though, as they are now in this new area, livestock start to go vanishing. Then, all of a sudden, women and children start going missing. In the middle of the night, They were hearing screaming.
Yeah.
The Choctaw men then were like, okay, even though we have had security out on horses all night, something has now progressed to taking women and children. They asked one of their friends from a nearby tribe that had 4 sons that were excellent horseback riders to come. They were the best in the land. The people from this tribe gathered their best braves and they headed off. As they were getting closer to what the leader knew was the area, the younger people in the tribe really didn't know what was going on. They were kind of getting tired, out seemingly in the middle of nowhere. And the leader just bolts towards this large patch of forest. And as they're getting closer, they start to smell the decay of, yes, not being alive anymore, the deceased.
Oh, yeah, okay.
The younger braves and things, again, hadn't really smelled this before, so they didn't really understand. They were getting nauseous and vomiting. The other war-ridden ones, battle-hardened, had smelled this before. They knew what exactly it was. They bust right up into this dense patch of forest. They find scat everywhere. They find the remains of the people that are missing, bones and jewelry and such. Out of nowhere, 3 of these very large, nasty-looking Sasquatch-like things come out and start roaring at them. The leader charges right up. He starts trying to fight one, swats his horse, and immediately unalives it. He flips off, starts shooting as he stands up with his revolvers, not really doing that much damage. He then pulls out his knife, tries to attack it. You got to respect the valiant effort, I guess, but his head is completely taken off by one of the Sasquatch behind them. Well, the rest of the Braves had buffalo rifles, and they were able to smoke these things, apparently, there was a bunch of them just unloading on them. They unalived 2 of them immediately. One of them was crawling away, and in some sort of language or something was probably asking for mercy. They smoked it. Then you have another case, a completely different part of an area involving a completely different tribe, speaking about how at night these large Sasquatch hairy-like men or creatures would come in with rocks and sticks and would try to destroy their villages. Only problem is the natives had bows and arrows and fire and such, so it was actually pretty even for the most part. Yet it went on for quite a long time. You look into like the Dennis Martin case where he went missing. Some people say that the report was it was a large bear-looking man or a large human-looking man. Yep. Interesting stuff right there.
Humanoid, yeah, okay.
Yep. Yeah, so it makes me wonder, is it just because you and I, everyone's got different personalities? I mean, animals are different too. Some animals are chill, some are more obnoxious. All right. Could that be occurring? Sure. Or is there something a little bit more sinister going on? I mean, if you revert back in time frames, it's been proven that some of our ancestors ate each other, Neanderthals ate some of us, we fought back, etc. And you reverse it even more. That type of behavior has been occurring. Let's per se that they are, some sort of relative of ours from ancient times, etc. They're not going to look at us as anything else but potential rivalry and food, which is messed up.
With these Bigfoot sightings, I know one back home, law enforcement guy was called out about 11 o'clock at night. This older guy was leaving his dog out, and he saw this 12-foot creature. And the older man said he wasn't afraid because this Bigfoot creature had kind eyes. And another friend of mine who saw something in our hometown on the outskirts, and it wasn't one, but it was 2 Bigfoot creatures. One was cinnamon, one was black. One was larger than the other, and they looked at him like they were curious, and then they turned and they walked away like humans, not like bear, and they walked away. And later I went out there and I reported this to some of the Bigfoot community in Pennsylvania, and went out there and looked for tracks and everything. But in most of the cases, I think in all of the cases that I know, the Bigfoot has been non-hostile. And there's never been a case of somebody being by Bigfoot, although we do have cases of people being black bear. And I talk about that. I talk about the black bears and that in the Lost Tribes of Bigfoot. But I think that the most amazing thing, I mean, to me, is and again, I cover this in the book extensively, but the Patterson-Gimlin film of 1967. These two guys are just riding in Northern California. They were shooting a documentary. They were going to raise money to make enough money to do a Bigfoot expedition and finally find this thing. Well, Patterson and Gimlin, Roger Patterson and Bob Gimlin, came around the bend, and there's a female Bigfoot. They later called it Patty, but it was only 58 seconds. But this 58-second video of Patty turning around, looking at Patterson, and then walking away, is the most valid proof we have that Bigfoot exists. It's been probably scrutinized as much as the Kennedy assassination Zapruder film. Scientists have looked at this. And one interesting thing about the film was that John Napier, the British primatologist, I'm sure your listeners are familiar with him, but he was working at the Smithsonian, and in 1972, he was presented with the Patterson-Gimlin film. So he got together some of the scientists. There were a bunch of Russians there, Russian scientists, and the Soviet Union at the time. But they got together and looked at this, and Napier said, no, this is a fake. And the reason he said that Patty was a fake was that he said that it had an upper body like an ape and the bottom like a hominid, like a human. It walked, it was a bipedal creature. And Napier just felt that Patterson and Gimlin cobbled these two elements together, to make this creature, and that it was a fake. That was in 72. In 1974, researchers in Ethiopia discovered Lucy, and they named it after the Beatles, Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds. So this was Australopithecus, and Australopithecus had an upper body like an ape and had the bottom part like a hominid, like a bipedal hominid. So when Napier heard about this, he said, "Wait a second, I've been wrong. Patty, the Patterson-Gimlin film, is the same thing. Had the same structure as Lucy, the Australopithecus." So Napier changed his mind. That was only in a 2-year period, and he said that, I believe that it's a real, that it's not a hoax, that it's actually a legitimate film. So this was a great example of science coming full circle and validating some theories, some hypotheses. And this is what we do. We say that, Dogman is real, it exists. And then you have people get together and say, yes, it is. No, it's not. But you look for eyewitness reports. You look for evidence. You look for things that can, give us more clarity. But you use the scientific method, and that is that you allow other people to look at the same evidence and decide whether or not it's valid or not. And that's a scientific method. With a lot of these things that we're dealing with, and both the paranormal and the and cryptozoological, we don't have the proof that we need. We don't have those bodies and we don't have the DNA. And until we get that, we're not going to satisfy the scientific community, because that's exactly what they're looking for.
All acute observations right there. Very well spoken. I would assume, again, I always preach assumptions aren't good. Anyone out there that listens to what I'm talking about here has had to have seen Monster Quest, and I know they break it down pretty good. Yet, as we are starting to kind of come to home base here, have you seen the Freeman footage personally? This is just my thoughts. I think that's the most legit one that I've ever seen. I do find the Patterson-Gimlin one interesting, but as a journalist, I found some pretty shady historical things involving Patterson, where he didn't seem like he was the most straightforward shooter, I guess. Yeah. Whereas Gimlin is a pretty cool dude. I don't think he had anything to do with the bamboozling. We can also talk about that at some point in time. But there's a lot of
some of the people that Patterson associated with, there
shady.
they might have been a little bit shady.
But
again, overall, I think that this film is legitimate, and but but it's something that we could talk about. I just think that it's just an amazing piece of record that's been scrutinized, slowed down, digitized. I mean, just
Yep.
improved.
I know that. Like, I
Yes.
remember when I was 11, I spent money. That was Christmas money to get that DVD.
Yeah.
I'm
Okay.
with you. I mean, I'm pretty optimistic that it's been ridiculed enough. Just as a journalist, though, I do need to play devil's advocate, and when things
Yeah.
do,
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. And do that. Yeah. I mean, you could believe that it's not authentic, and and cite your reasons. But I've done tons of research. I've watched it. I've read about it. I've seen it. The majority of the people that I respect in the Bigfoot community, like Jeff Meldrum and Lauren Coleman, I believe that it's legitimate, and as well as people like John Napier, and but again, let it be controversial. I think it's still controversial, and that just
of
adds.
course, yeah.
I think if it forces the conversation, if it forces guys like me and you to discuss it and try to find the parameters of the narrative, then so be it. That's great for the craft. That's a wonderful thing that we're doing, for cryptozoology and the paranormal. Just having this discussion, having an intelligent discussion, without nobody getting really, whacked out, and
Right. So many people don't have a chill pill. And to be quite honest with you, I'm with you. I do lean more towards the aspect of that being legitimate. I just, like I said, found interesting background on Patterson, which just made me
Yeah.
interested into why he associated with certain people he did.
Supposedly he had Bob Hermonius or Hermias wear a costume, and he was going to go and use that. There was some just shoddy background that sort of like almost like muddied the waters. I mean,
That's all. Yes, exactly.
So that's what it was. But then again, they never found any records, any suit, any of that. So it was all he said, she said, and
yes. Yep. And I mean, some of that must have came from somewhere, but like you said too, also the Planet of the Apes. Look at that though. That was Hollywood that had a huge funding, and then if you look at the Planet of the Apes versus the Gimlin film, that one looks more realistic than their depiction.
Yeah, exactly.
And
yeah.
so they tried to recreate that. Yes.
You're on top of this. Yeah, I mean, yeah. So.
And I wanted to ask real quick though, too, have you seen the Freeman footage yourself?
No, I haven't, but I have. I need to do that. I've had, notes on my desk, and that was one thing that I meant to do. Talk about the Colorado Bigfoot sighting that most people feel it was a hoax. This couple were celebrating their anniversary, and somebody on the train, they were going through Colorado on a train, and they saw this Bigfoot creature down in the valley. And most people that I talked to, Bigfoot researchers, believe that it was a hoax, and but also kind of not real smart to do that, because this was during elk hunting season, and it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to be wearing a ghillie suit or a Bigfoot outfit when you're down there during hunting season. So anyway, that was good.
Yeah, that's the Freeman video right there. If you actually, while I talk real quick, check that out before we wrap this up. And that's very interesting what you had just mentioned. Yeah. The thing is, too, I remember also, I believe it was in Washington, some bozo was running around the highway dressed up as a Bigfoot, and he got hit and unalived. It's like, what are you doing? So, unfortunately, things like that, when they come into play, it's like, all right, what the heck? And I just think that makes it a lot harder to figure out what's going on, like with the whole term Bigfoot, where originally that was actually hoaxed by those lumberjacks to mess around with their friends, but that's just Bigfoot. I mean, now we revert back to the Native American lore, Sasquatch. Yeah, so those guys just hoaxed those big feet, which then became Bigfoot, but that doesn't mean everything else is super bizarre stuff. But as we do tie this up, my friend, what do you think about that Freeman footage? And
I'm looking at it. It looks pretty legit. That was 1994. Right? Yeah.
I'm telling you, man, that is the best stuff I personally have ever seen for a footage. It looks just to me like how I would perceive that Sasquatch to look. Personally, it's just me, but to the audience, you can check it out. Just type in Paul Freeman Sasquatch footage. I don't own it, so I can't show it here, but it's really easy to find.
Yeah, very good. Okay, yeah, I'm going to do some further research on that, but thanks for
have to, my friend.
I had heard about it. I don't think I ever...
It's slept on, man. It deserves way more publicity, in my opinion, because, like you said, everyone took the whole Gimlin and, Patterson one and really looked at it, but, man, people sleep on that one, and there is no alterations in that. That guy, unfortunately, rest in peace, he's no longer with us, but he's a former park ranger. This is when you have to carry these old school cameras, like, on your shoulder, dude.
Oh, yeah, okay, yeah.
He doesn't move that fast anyhow because he was beat up towards the end right there, so there's no way to alter the footage at all. There's no way a human in a suit could walk or even move anything like that. That looks like
you can tell something by the stride,
right?
And the way they move. And they have guys like Meldrum who track this. They track the primates and how they move. That location that
I don't think I've ever heard him really talk about this either, man. Yeah.
Yeah. So what they did was with that Patterson Gimlin film. I mean, they made foot casts, and they saw that the casts were bigger than any human or bear, and also the stride was larger than any human or bear could do. So there's there's a whole lot of elements to this. Maybe elements of high strangeness, but enough elements to get my attention to think that there's something valid here. So I wanted to say, if any of your listeners score a copy of The Lost Tribes of Bigfoot, maybe on Amazon, to please be so kind as to put a review on Amazon. That's as an author, that's our bread and butter. That just tells the world that that the book is being recognized, being read, and it really means a lot to us. So those reviews are probably the best thing you could do to help support authors like myself. So again, my name is Maxim Furek, F-U-R-E-K. I'm a paranormal author, and The Lost Tribes of Bigfoot is my latest book, but feel free to check out Co-Region Hoodoo, Paranormal Tales from Inside the Pit, which is really pretty bizarre. It's like an encyclopedia of the paranormal. And there's several chapters there on cryptids and Bigfoot as well, but I'm on Amazon, and your listeners could check me out there.
Boom. That is great stuff. I'll make sure to read through the bio you sent me so that way I can get all the links up. And if they're not, make sure you do send me the links. And to the audience, you do need to do the same thing here pretty much. As Maxim was speaking, if you don't hit the like button, then YouTube's like, yeah, these guys are not cool. Which means, obviously, if you tune in and listen to us, I'd hope you would obviously like our content. I'm guilty of it now, not as much because I'm a content creator and I understand, but before, videos that I loved and stuff that I would watch all the time, I would not hit the like button until I loved it, but I didn't realize how important it was. I do appreciate everyone, yet to the audience, this will be the conclusion of the meeting for the Midnight Society. It is the early hours of the morning, and Maxim has many things to attend to. As previously mentioned, he's a very busy individual, yet no worries, we'll get him back on here at some point when he has some free time. And if you are interested in keeping up with him, well, all you gotta do is check out some of his books, check out his work, and check out his links in the description. Thanks for hanging out with us tonight, man. I appreciate you.
Oh yeah, thanks for having me on, and I appreciate it, and hope to do it again.
Ooh, my creatures, I do adore every single one of you. And thank you for tuning in tonight. Please like, comment, subscribe, share, and feed the algorithm. I will catch you very soon.